It's time for CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, and TuneIn. The easiest thing to do is tell Alexa or Siri to play CBJ in 30. Here's your host, Bob McElligott.
I think if I can get through today and get to tomorrow, I can get through tomorrow and get to the next day. That's what it's been like in this quarantine situation, this stay-at-home order that's going on. I hope things are going well with you. I hope that you are safe. On this edition of CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union, I'm going to talk a little bit about Blue Jackets prospects with the guests that I'll bring in just a moment. And speaking of prospects, the Blue Jackets signed a player yesterday. They signed 20-year-old defenseman Tim Burney to a 3-year entry-level contract. Now, Tim was taken in the 6th round of the 2018 draft, 159th overall. This year, he had 4 goals and 7 assists and 8 penalty minutes. He played with the ZSC Lions in the Swiss National League. We've seen him at the development camps, so Tim Burney officially in the fold with a 3-year entry-level contract for the Blue Jackets. They think a lot of this guy, and we're going to be seeing and hearing more about him in the very near future. Right now, I want you to hear about Telhio Credit Union, because at Telhio Credit Union, they have plenty of services. They have personal banking services, they have business banking services, and one or both could certainly fit the needs that you have. And maybe it's time to take a step back and think about where you have your money or how you're using your money or what kind of perks you could get by putting your money somewhere else. If that's the case, go to their website at telhio.org. Right there, it'll tell you the benefits of joining a credit union, the different services that they have, the benefits that you will get by using those services. It is all right there. There's a live chat option on the right side of the screen. If you can't find exactly what you're looking for, they are there to help you each and every day and help you with whatever you need. That's what they're all about. They are customer service people. They want you to be a part of their organization. They want you to feel like a part of the family. Telhio Credit Union is open to everyone in Central and Southwestern Ohio. They are federally insured by NCUA. Today I'm joined by Jeff Svoboda. He's a Jackets insider, and you can find all of his work at BlueJackets.com. And also Dylan Tyrer, who works with me on the Blue Jackets radio network doing pregame and intermissions, and this week launched a new podcast focusing on the Blue Jackets prospects. It's called the Pipeline Podcast, and of course you can get it where you get all of your favorite Blue Jackets podcast. And Dylan, let me start with you. You spoke with Liam Foodie on the very first edition of your podcast. That seems like it's a no-brainer. Liam Foodie is a guy that the Blue Jackets drafted in the first round a couple of years ago. We saw him a little bit this year. He came up, he played a few games. When he went back to junior, because he had to, John Tortorella talked about how much they would miss his speed, miss his skill in the lineup. I think it's hands down that he is the number one prospect, and he has a great chance to make this team out of training camp, whenever training camp may be.
He's the guy that everybody's interested in. He's the guy that was up this season. He's the team's last first-round draft pick. And he's a player that can contribute for the Blue Jackets right away, I think. We saw what he was able to do in the 2 games this season. He fit right in, and I think he knows that too. He talked to me about wanting to have a really, really big summer this year, make an impression in Blue Jackets camp, and I think he's going to have an opportunity to do that whenever next season's training camp is, like you hinted at. And he's a player that the Blue Jackets, frankly, needed to come up at the time he came up this season. They might need him again next year, especially given his skill set, which is unique, I think, given that he is a late first-round draft pick. The first-round pick, I think, gets people excited in the sense that, oh, he's going to bring a lot of offense, but he's more so known for his speed and his defense. He was named the best skater in the OHL Western Conference, the best penalty killer, and the second best defensive forward overall at the end of their season. And that's maybe an underrated part of his game because, like I said, I think the average fan sees first-round pick and they think goals and assists and points. But he's a guy that's that his style, I think, fits right in with the Blue Jackets. So he'll be a valuable piece moving forward and a guy that I did enjoy talking to because I think he's going to be here right away.
Yeah, and Jeff, speaking of right away, it doesn't have to be next year. I mean, there is no more junior hockey. They canceled everything for the remainder of the season. There's no Memorial Cup. That means a player like Liam Foodie, without there being playoffs, because the rules are they have to wait until playoffs are over to join the team that drafted them, their season's done. So should the Blue Jackets come back to play this summer, there's a good chance that Liam Foodie might play for the Blue Jackets again this year.
Yeah, it does in fact seem that way. And if you looked at his first 2 games, he did not look overwhelmed by any stretch of the imagination. Going in there, playing against the Tampa Bay team that obviously is a very good team, then playing for the Blue Jackets in Buffalo. And in those 2 games, he looked like an NHL player. It looked like he fit the part. I think he really gained a lot of confidence as the year went on. Had to go back to London and was injured at the start of the year, but then goes to the World Juniors, has a really big tournament, catches a lot of eyes over there, wins a gold medal. I think that really helped him confidence-wise. And then getting that chance to play with the Jackets, his speed really showed. I think his offensive instinct showed. Dylan talked about it, the defensive side of Foodie, and I think that's a guy that's not going to have any trouble sliding in and playing well on the defensive side of the puck, despite his age. But at the same time, there's some offense in him. We saw that when he was on the top six line when he was with the Blue Jackets. He fit in with guys like, Gus Nyquist and Boone Jenner and some of those higher up names when he played. Had some really nice passes and had an assist. So I think that he's a guy that looks like he's ready. When he comes in, he'll have his ups and downs. But if they get a chance to get back out there this year, I think he's a guy that absolutely has the skill, has the ability to jump in and see what he has. And so, I really enjoyed listening to Dylan's podcast with him. Give Dylan a little shout out there. I thought the first episode was really good. You learn a lot about Liam, and I think he's a guy. Yeah, you could see him out there as soon as the next time the Blue Jackets play, whenever that might be.
Well, and Dylan, as you pointed out too in the podcast, he was kind of a trendsetter, unfortunately, because he did get hurt in Traverse City. He was the first injury of the year for the Blue Jackets, and who knew that was going to be the first of what seemed to be about 1,000 injuries for this team before the pause came.
He talked about it in there. He said that it really did stink just to get hurt in the very last game, in overtime of the very last game of that camp in Traverse City. And it hurt him for multiple reasons, not just because he kind of had a delayed start to his OHL season, but because he couldn't compete in Blue Jackets camp. And something that I've talked with Jeff about all season long is just the fact that some of these young players going to John Tortorella's training camp get so much better just from doing that. And Foodie missed out on another season of that. Not only could he not make an impression with the Blue Jackets this camp, because there was kind of a feeling that he had an opportunity to make the Blue Jackets right out of training camp, but he missed training camp as a whole. He couldn't get better, I guess, in that time under John Tortorella in that tough camp. But I think what he was able to do this season spoke for itself. He goes to the World Juniors, wins a gold medal there, has a great tournament, gets the call up to the Blue Jackets, and he talked about it with me in the interview. That call up did a lot for his confidence. He went back down to junior, was on an 18-game point streak when the season was canceled, and I think that was the best hockey he's played in his whole life, as he told me.
Well, and Jeff, the real question would be, where's he going to fit in when the Blue Jackets come back to play? Because, look, when this first happened, we'd hoped it would be a couple of weeks. It's obviously more than that. There was some early hope that maybe the season returns in May. That doesn't seem to be any kind of a possibility right now. There are a lot of things being thrown out and talked about. What happens, who knows? But let's say that the league doesn't resume play until sometime in mid to late July. Well, Oliver Bjorkstrand more than likely will be on track to be back by that time. Seth Jones will be back. Not that affects Liam Foodie, but what I'm saying, the Blue Jackets are going to be healthy for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And we were expecting Cam Atkinson to play in that game. That ended up getting canceled against Pittsburgh on that Thursday when the league went into a pause. So, that was one guy who was going to be back right there. I talked to Seth Jones last week. As you mentioned, he's a guy that's pretty much for sure going to be healthy by the time hockey ends up being played. I would think Oliver Bjorkstrand would be on that same road. So, yeah, certainly a good sign for the Blue Jackets to get guys like that back. And you'd have to see, how many guys down the road would be there. I think Dean Kukan probably getting along as well, and even a guy like Alexander Texier if you get further out. So, that would be good news for the Blue Jackets. I remember when this whole thing happened, a lot of fans kind of said, it's unfortunate to not see hockey right now. But the thing that is good is obviously you get a chance maybe if you're the Jackets to get healthy. I don't think people kind of, as you said, really knew at the time exactly how long it was going to be. But I think there is absolutely that case. And, you mentioned Foodie there, right? Who knows where he would fit in. But that falls under the category of good problems to have. Suddenly, if you've got enough guys healthy that you have, a battle to really get into the lineup, that would be great for the Jackets down the stretch. If there is a down the stretch, certainly I'm hoping so. And I think the league is as well, but you'll have to see. But yeah, can you imagine, having a full Blue Jackets team out there, take the way that this team is playing, really from, New Year's Eve on, and add in, a healthy Seth Jones and a healthy Oliver Bjorkstrand and a healthy Cam Atkinson. Suddenly, if this team has a chance to make a playoff run, I'd be really intrigued to see it, because I think if you put this whole roster back together, you've got to feel pretty good about just what this team might be able to accomplish down the stretch.
Yeah, and when it comes to Seth Jones, I think one of the biggest things that came out of this is, and Jeff, tell me if you think this is true. I mean, you're around all the time too. I think he would have been playing this week regardless. I think he would have pushed himself. I think, especially if they were still right in the hunt, unless they had totally bottomed out and had no chance of making the playoffs. I think he would have pushed himself to be back as early as possible. Now he doesn't have to do that. Now he can take the time to have the full recovery.
Yeah, for sure. And when I talked to him, I think it was last week, he basically said, if they were playing right now, he'd be pushing himself to get back out there. So I wouldn't have been surprised at all if he was a guy that can't try to come back for these last couple games and try to get healthy. But yeah, now the luxury is, for guys like him and Bjorkstrand and even Cam, who, I think was going to come back and play, but that high ankle sprain was really going to bother him, the rest of the year, no matter how long it went. I think guys like that are going to be fully healthy now the next time they take the ice for the Blue Jackets. And so that's a real positive as well, that, it's not like you guys coming back at 75, 80% and just gotten through it, because that's what hockey players do. These guys are going to be ready to go. And so you really hope, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where they just jump into a playoffs, but you really hope that you can see this Blue Jackets team back at full strength, because I think it would be a lot of fun to watch, and the way that they played and the way that the identity that they kind of created, if you can add in that little bit of skill, I think this team would have a chance. And that's all you can ask for, is a chance. They played well against some of the teams that they probably match up with in the playoffs, if it were to come down to that. So, I'd want to see it if I'm a Blue Jackets fan, for sure. And, plus, to keep the playoff streak alive, if they come back and do play and they make it for a fourth straight year, that puts them in really rare company in the NHL. There's not a whole lot of teams that have done that. So I think it'd be a big thing for the organization and a big thing for, just the fan base if they're able to get back and do this. So, you got me excited now talking a little bit about hockey and what might be.
Yeah, and by the way, as long as they're in, I don't care if it's a 16-team field, 24-team field. If it's a year that they happen to change the rules and they still get in the playoffs, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me as long as they're there. Dylan, and we're talking about prospects, and we were talking about Liam Foodie, but what Jeff just said is true. When you come back to play, whether you're going to play a couple of regular season games before hitting the playoffs or go right into the playoffs, who knows? But it's going to be the time when you need your veteran players. You've got to have your veteran players back. And, oh, by the way, the Blue Jackets aren't the only team that's talking about how this layoff is going to help them. You only have to look over to Pittsburgh, where Jake Gensel has been injured and was on the shelf for months, where, those people are licking their chops to have a chance to see Jake Gensel play on the opposite wing of Jason Zucker with Sidney Crosby in the middle there. So it would be a very healthy overall in the NHL, very healthy postseason.
Yeah, I've heard some NHL players talk about it, some other people. It might be the most exciting playoff there ever is, just because so many guys will be healthy, so many players will be rested. It's almost like starting the season with you. I don't care how they do a playoff, as long as they can make it happen with however many teams are in it. I think it would be really, really exciting just to see something different. Not saying that I want them to blow up the way the playoffs are structured right now, but if they were to do something new for a year, I think that would be really fun and really cool. And I'm right there with you guys too. If the Blue Jackets were able to have everybody back healthy, they could be a really dangerous team come the Stanley Cup playoffs, like they were last season. The one thing that I would say is just the fact that they've been playing without so many of their regulars for so long. It would be a little bit tricky getting back chemistry-wise, I think, if they were just to pick up straight away with the playoffs or even just a couple regular season games. How does it work chemistry-wise if you've got, 3 days of practice and then you've got 2 games to play and then you're right into the playoffs, getting guys like Cam Atkinson right back in there, Oliver Bjorkstrand, maybe even a Liam Foodie if he were to come up and contribute to the Blue Jackets. How does that all work together would be my biggest question there. But like Jeff said, it's a pretty good problem to have, I think, when you have so much depth on a team and so much young depth at that.
And, Jeff, let's go right between the pipes, because the Blue Jackets are going to have decisions to make. And, again, as you said earlier, good decisions, because when the season paused, they had 2 goaltenders. One was, in his rookie season, had really found himself, and the other one was an all-star that got hurt and was rounding back into form right at the time that the season stopped.
Yeah, obviously, I think we learned a lot about those guys as the season went on. We learned just how good Jonas Korpisalo can be if he gets a chance to play a lot and be a number one starter. We learned, the ceiling on Elvis. I think, we also learned he was pretty mentally tough to start the way he did and end up coming back and have the season that he had in the second half after, what was really a really rough start. And so we saw his talents as the year went on. And so, that would be the interesting question. They'd really never had a chance down the stretch to have both of those guys healthy from, December on, to where they had to really make a choice between the two of them. Because, Corpy goes down, this game, he comes back, he's the backup, and then Elvis gets hurt. And so they never really had that goaltending controversy that a lot of people really wanted to talk about there from January into February. So it would be an interesting question to see how it would go. And you'd almost have to be in a situation where, if you get a short regular season, maybe each guy plays a time or two, and then you really just have to ride the hot hand almost. It'd be interesting to see how that would go. But I think when we've seen even teams that have a little bit more experience, guys in between the pipes that they're more willing, come a playoff time, that you got to put the guy in there that you think on that night is going to be the one that is the one that gives you the best chance to win the game. And so whether that be Elvis or Corpy, whoever happens to be the hottest guy at that time, and whoever seems to be on their game the quickest, who knows again how much time we're going to have left to kind of get this figured out before there is a playoff or hockey comes back, or however it may end up working out. You're just gonna have to go with that hot guy. You're gonna have to go with the guy that's feeling it, and then just kind of go from there. But if you're the Blue Jackets, I think you feel pretty good about the two guys that you have. That one of them is going to be good enough to give you playoff caliber goaltending down the stretch, and it'd be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, it would be pretty fun to watch. And as you alluded to, the fan debate is going to be that's what'll drive me crazy when that all begins. But that's fine. That's all part of it. I get it. I understand. Dylan, let's go back to prospects for just a second. Who do you have lined up for your second edition of the Pipeline Podcast?
7th round draft pick in 2018, the same draft that Liam Foodie was taken in. Trey Fix-Wolanski, guy that just played his first professional season, his first full pro season with the Blue Jackets AHL affiliate up in Cleveland. Had a slow start to his year, was hurt a lot like Liam Foodie. He was hurt early in the season, had a slow start, but in the past 2 or so months, his game really started to come together. He was at almost a point per game pace at one point right before the season got paused. So another guy that I think the Blue Jackets are really excited about, and one of those players that's smaller in stature, but he's got a big heart and a lot of skill as well. So another guy that I enjoyed talking to because of that.
All right, Jeff, let's go from that standpoint. Cleveland Monsters. The American Hockey League is paused just like the National Hockey League. This is an interesting one for me because everybody else is canceled. East Coast Hockey League is done. We mentioned junior hockey is done. The American Hockey League, I just want to see what ends up happening because I don't know if they can hold out until July like the NHL. Maybe they can. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But let's just say that they don't. Let's just say they get to a point where they say, look, it's drop dead for us. We're just going to come back and try it again next year. There will be guys from Cleveland that get a chance to come up here, and especially if you get in the playoffs, they'll be the Black Aces. And I wonder if Trey Fix-Wolanski will be one of the guys that they'll want to bring around and have in a playoff kind of atmosphere.
Well, heck, Bob, we saw pretty much the entire Cleveland roster at some point this year with all the injuries that the Blue Jackets had.
But not him. But not him, right?
He was maybe one or two guys that is a really bona fide prospect that really didn't get the call. And I think that was because, as Dylan pointed out, he was injured at the start of the season. And that really cost him a lot, and it had to suck for him because he was a guy who I think was really raring to go. Played a great playoff last year for the Monsters, one of the best players on the ice, coming out of juniors, and then thought this year he was going to get the chance to really show his stuff, and then gets injured 4 games into the season. And it cost him about 2 months. And so I think he never quite really got back to the point where he was as good as he could have been. But I think that, obviously this is a guy, mentioned him smaller in stature, but big in heart. He's a competitive guy. Certainly can score. So I think he's a guy, talking to some people in the organization over the years, they like him a lot and feel like he's going to be a part of this future for the Blue Jackets. I think he's a guy that needed a little bit of pro seasoning at the start just to kind of learn, at 5'7", 5'8", how he was going to have to play, kind of like, Cam Atkinson early in his career, making that transition up to the pro level of just how to play when you're at that stature. But, I think his ceiling is very high. I think he could be a really fun player to watch down the road. You watched him in training camp and he can score. There's no doubt about that. And so, I think he'd be a guy you'd love to have along and maybe kind of see how it goes. Whether it be next year or down the road, I think he's the guy that's definitely going to contribute. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they have, a guy like that around. And heck, you could have about, 20 Black Aces around if you want to, if the AHL gets canceled here. But he's certainly a guy, if you talk about the guys in Cleveland who really have high ceilings, I think he's definitely on that list. So I'm looking forward to hearing Dylan's podcast with him.
Yeah, and Dylan, it wasn't that long ago when if you were a 7th round pick, it was nice. You could say you got drafted, but the likelihood of you really getting a chance to play in the National Hockey League and be an impact guy probably wasn't that good. But now things have changed. Look at Marcus Nudavara. He's a 7th round pick, and he's when he's healthy, he's been a regular on the blue line for the Blue Jackets. So it's really, the game has changed so much. I mean, the 1st round picks barely go to the minors anymore. And the guys that are the 7th round picks, I mean, they got a real shot.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I'd say that he's a 7th round pick likely because of his size. If you look at the numbers that he was able to put up in junior, he was a prolific scorer, over 100 points his last season in the WHL for the Edmonton Oil Kings. And he's a guy that scored at every level. He did it before he got to major junior. He's done it now with the Monsters. He's, like I said, the last couple of months, almost a point per game player after that slow start to the season. And he's a guy that can make it happen in multiple ways. He can shoot and score. He's a good passer as well, a right shot winger, a smaller guy. And I've never heard really a smaller player, a shorter player like that talk about his size being an advantage. But Trey Fix-Wolanski talks about that smaller size of his being an advantage, able to get into tighter spaces, especially in the corners. And he talked about some of the things that he's learned this season in his first pro year that he has to improve in as a smaller player to use that size to advantage, mainly those battles in the corner. He talked about that he just has to be quicker off the first step, has to be the first player to the puck when it goes below the goal line like that. And that's what he's going to be working on this summer as well. He talked about his cardio, his fitness. He wants to trim down a little bit. And I think if he's able to do that, then he'll be able to get a little bit more of a look next season for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, and I was talking about how you used to be a late round pick, maybe not really get a chance, but as you said, the small guys, they just never got picked. They just had to fight their way through. Look at Marty St. Louis and what it took for him to get to the National Hockey League, and then he turns out to be a trailblazer. But with the game the way it is now, those guys do get the opportunity. Jeff, what's going to be another really interesting thing to watch, no matter what happens with the season, they've already postponed the draft, and then you've got the free agency period, and Jarmo Kekalainen is a guy that has done wondrous things in the summer a couple different times when he made some big trades that took people off guard. This summer is going to be interesting to watch because how long is this period going to be? Because you have to wait until you come back to play. But I think, and again, there's no guarantee they're coming back in July. It's just the most popular theory that has been thrown out there. But I think in some ways, as you said earlier, Jeff, if you have everybody healthy, and you get hot, you have a chance to go on a run. I don't think there's any question about that. But let's say that you're not healthy, or let's say you can't get that chemistry, like Dylan said, and you get knocked out early. Even if you do, it's only going to be a short wait, 6 to 8 weeks before you're right back to training camp. So it's going to be interesting to watch how the GMs attack this whole the draft, the free agency period, and loading up. It'll be really interesting to me to see if there's a guy that is hoisting the Stanley Cup 1 week and 2.5 weeks later is on another team.
I mean, it's almost going to have to be that way. If you look at, you're right, the condensed time frame that you're going to have to probably get things done in. And I wouldn't be against, to me, you look at this and things have been done the same way for so long. You've got the calendar as the way it is. But I think you're in a situation now, obviously this is unprecedented, where you can do things a little bit differently. And if you're ever going to try something different and try something you would never under any other circumstances do, maybe this is the time to do it. Maybe this is the time for, a 24-team playoff, but you have, 3-game series at the start, or 5-game series, or whatever it may be. And I think at the end, we'd want to see 7-game series, but for the Stanley Cup and things like that. But can you get creative in a playoff way? Can you get creative in the way that you do the draft or free agency or things like that? There's a lot smarter people than me that probably have better ideas. But I think if you're the NHL, and certainly, we've seen the NBA talk about ways that they're thinking about changing the game, whether it be mid-season tournaments or different things like that. But if you're the NHL, this is a time where you can maybe experiment a little bit and think about how can we do things a little bit differently. And, I'm not worried about teams necessarily running out of time to figure out what they're going to do. I imagine team executives right now, when they have almost literally nothing else to do, they're firming up draft lists. They're thinking about next season's roster. They're not going to need a tremendous amount of time in the summer to figure out those things. It's going to be a whirlwind. It's almost going to be a bit of a circus when it happens, which is fun though, because I think those are the kind of things that get people talking about hockey and sports in general now is, transactions and free agency and drafts. And, if you can put all those things together in the summer, I think you're going to have a time where people are you're going to have a really continuous hockey talk from, if they're able to get back in July, as you said, all the way into the start of that next season. It's going to be a marathon kind of there, or it's going to be a sprint there, not a marathon, excuse me. But that could be fun. And like I say, if you can look at if you're the NHL and can maybe think of some different ways to do things and to really kind of, tap into the fan bases. And, right now everybody's trying something different to try to keep hockey on people's minds. There's a lot of things I think that can be taken from this whole thing and be used going forward. And so I don't know if I really answered your question there, but just something I was kind of thinking about as you were asking it is, maybe this is a chance to look at things a little bit differently. And, it's going to be a different off season. So you're coming from that standpoint of it's not going to be the same no matter what. So maybe you try to do things differently and put in some new wrinkles and see how they go, just maybe, throwing that out there. But either way, it's going to be an interesting, who knows what's going to happen. We've said that about a million times, but there is a potential that once everything gets back here, there's going to be a lot going on, and it's going to be a lot to kind of internalize and a lot to take in. But that'll I say always keep you in the forefront of hockey at least, which will be fun.
No, I totally agree with you because, as I said, even if you were not to make it very far in the playoffs, your fan base will stay engaged and watch the playoffs because training camp is coming just on the other side of the playoffs for sure. And Dylan, I wonder if there are a stack of ideas somewhere in the NHL offices that they've come up with over the years. They kind of shelved them because they thought, no, that'll be too radical. No, we can't do this. But let's just put this aside for some time in the future. I wonder if there is a file somewhere that they may open up, or they may have already opened up and looked at some of those ideas to maybe spice it up a little bit, as Jeff just said, because you do have the opportunity. You have a built-in excuse. Even if people get upset that you're going against tradition or whatever it is, everybody understands why. I think this is the perfect chance for the league to take some of those ideas, if they have them, and put them into play.
Well, hey, I'll give them a lot of credit if that's the case. If they've been planning for something like this and they've had some ideas in the bank going forward. But the one that I've heard that I really like is playing a round robin tournament for the first overall pick, which I have no idea how that would work. I don't know if players would be, motivated enough to do it. I don't know if it works logistically, but I think that would be really, really interesting. And given that so much revenue has been lost with I think that would be another interesting way to maybe pick up a little bit of revenue for some of these teams that could use it. Maybe that wouldn't be the fairest way to go about it for a team like the Red Wings, who has had a much worse season than maybe anybody else in the league, and they probably deserve that first overall pick. But I think a round robin tournament for the first overall pick would be really, really fun. But when it comes to some of that offseason stuff too, I have no idea how free agency would work in such a short period. But I think they could do a lot of fun stuff with the draft. If you don't think teams are thinking about trades right now or contract extensions, you're kidding yourself, which I think, and you guys hinted at it too, I think this might be good for the NHL. Just the fact that people are going to be continuously talking about it all summer long until whenever this season resumes or next season starts. The fact that, we're never going to stop talking about hockey. There's not going to be a dead period really this summer as it looks right now. And I think that could bode well for the league going forward too. Not to mention thing that they're doing on social media with the players popping up, with the players doing Zoom talks for fans that fans can watch. I think all this stuff is really beneficial.
Much like us, they kind of got forced into doing some new things and some different things. And you know what, Jeff, and I said this, I was doing a radio interview with their station in Lima the other day. I think even in our profession, that's been the good thing about a bad situation is we've been forced to recreate ourselves and do some different things, which I think in the long run is going to be a good thing.
Yeah, and it's just so easy to fall into routine and fall into tradition. And I think whether it be the league or whether it be the way we do things, you kind of just get into that same way of doing things. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think this offers us a chance. You say to try to think of new things, try to how do we engage fan bases more. Specifically, I put out on Twitter here recently. We're with Fox Sports Ohio re-showing the Tampa series from last year, reaching out to fans, trying to get their memories of that series and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe there's some new ways that you can engage and maybe players will have new things as well that they discover that they enjoy doing with the fans or with interviews or things like that where because they get tasked with kind of going through the same old with us on a regular basis, but other ways whether they be online or whether they be through gaming or whether they be these Zoom chats that they did, whatever it might be. That they discover, they enjoy doing something different and putting their personalities out there and things like that. And I think that's, we've seen in this league, and Torts has talked about it a million times, is that, you think about hockey back in the 70s and 80s and 90s and the personalities that some of these guys had. And, that was what made it so fun. And now that, the guys are, I think, just kind of caught. The culture of the league is to be cautious, just to not rock the boat and just to, kind of fall in line a little bit. And I maybe throughout this, they discover, going out there and talking about, whether it be Tiger King or anything like that, that they enjoy, showing a little bit of that personality is maybe something that they get more and more comfortable with as they kind of, without hockey, you almost have to do that. So, yeah, I think for the league in general, for all of us, it's going to kind of, force us all to get better a little bit. So hopefully we all do get better, and hopefully fans notice it and it becomes a little bit more of a better engagement, and we're able to bring people closer to the people and bring people closer to the sport when this whole thing is all said and done.
Hey, I just want to remind you, Fox Sports Ohio is great. Don't get me wrong, but there are also replays on the Blue Jackets radio network, and I believe they're going to do a Tampa series there too. So look into that. I mean,
Breaking
come
news
on, give
there, Bob.
Dylan and I a little bit of love, would you?
Very true. I already talked about how good Dylan's new podcast is, though.
Yeah, I know, but you
appreciate
haven't said a word about me, so I was just trying to get you to say one thing, just one thing.
Bob, I miss you. It's good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see you guys too. It's good to talk with you as well. Again, the next Pipeline podcast will be coming out on Tuesday. Trey Fix-Wolansky is going to be Dylan Tyrer's guest, and then you can check BlueJackets.com where Jeff Svoboda, the Jackets Insider, will have a write-up as well. So those two guys kind of work apart and together. Is that the way? Would you guys say it's kind of like that?
I just ride Dylan's coattails. It's all Dylan.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay, I was going to say that, and I was being nice. So, Jeff, thank you for being honest. I appreciate that. Anyway, guys, good luck to both of you. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Again, Jeff Svoboda is the Jackets Insider. You can find his work at BlueJackets.com. Dylan Tyrer joins me on the Blue Jackets Radio Network, and he's got that brand new podcast called the Pipeline Podcast, and he'll talk with Trey Fix-Wolansky coming up on Tuesday. I also want to remind you that on Monday, I'll have another Monday mailbag edition of CBJ and 30, presented by Ohio Credit Union. I am taking your questions at any time. You can either send them to me on Twitter at BobbyMacSports, or you can record them as a voice memo and send them to me as an email. Remember, if you do that, say your name and where you're from, and then state your question, and I'll be glad to put your voice on the show. You can email those questions to me, BobbyMac@BlueJackets.com. It's as simple as that. Hope you have a great weekend. Look forward to talking to you on Monday. That'll do it for this edition of CBJ and 30, presented by Ohio Credit Union. Until next time, I'm Bob McElligott saying so long.